I carry multiple titles, but primarily I'm responsible for a product called It's Mine into the Africa region. It's Mine is a technology it's not a technology talk. I'm going to stay away from the tech. I want to talk a little bit about data and about data protection and data sovereignty. So It's Mine is a completely unique technology in the industry today that has the ability to protect data no matter where it is. So we had a lot of talks and a lot of discussions. Simon spoke about security when he started talking about data security. We talk about DLP. We talk about, ultimately, it is our primary problem right now, and I'll get into some of the challenges. I was asked to present specifically around some of the corporate governance challenges that we have. And whilst this is Zimbabwe, and I am going to be honest, I use GPT here, and I went and looked because I don't understand the Zimbabwe landscape in terms of the legal governance. But to be quite frank, it's the same everywhere. Every country in the world, wherever you work, we have the same challenge with governance and the same problems with governance. I want to talk about data and how do we protect our data and how do we protect our organizations and how do we protect our companies in there. So one of the interesting things that comes up here obviously is the ownership of data and the challenge of data management and why it's a problem. This was actually specifically around board management and about board security. Now, I know that there's been some interesting laws that have come into place in Zimbabwe recently, and there's a lot of interesting challenges that are coming into play around managing the data and some of the challenges that your executives are facing and your board members are facing and your management teams are facing specifically around having to manage data. There's a number of challenges around there as well. There is certain compliance which is non-standard or non-demanded, like King is back. I was around from King 1 and King 2, but King compliance standards are in place. While they're not enforced in Zimbabwe, they are best practice, and having to become part of the global world stage, we are having to comply to them. So King is not, it's a South African standard that was set up that's been adopted around the world in terms of best practices around governance and around how do we manage our data and how do we protect our information. I'm not going to take, this is not a long challenge, but we know that the Data Protection Act was enacted in Zimbabwe in 2021, December 2021. I'm having a look at the chapter, and that's all up there, and that's all law, and that's your domain. What I know here is that it's presenting a whole lot of mandatory breach requirements in terms of data, and I'm going to get into the hugest challenge around this right now is, have we had a breach? And I'll talk about some of the data and some of the statistics and how we solve some of the problems going forward in there as well. But the mandatory breach notification requirements within Zimbabwe, and whether they're being managed or whether they're being enacted or not, or whether they're being enforced or not, is certainly going to come down the line. And we're going to start seeing more and more and more of that happening, where we're going to start being pushed and forced to have to conform to all of this, because there's going to be some severe punishments coming around. I'll talk a little bit about South African law briefly. And in South Africa, we've had some interesting changes over the last few months, last year, in that data breaches, there's now a digital platform to report on data breaches. If data breaches aren't reported on, there's some severe punishment. We have an act which is based on GDPR, international GDPR in South Africa, called POPIA, Protection of Personal Information Act. And the punishment is not particularly onerous there. The punishment in South Africa for non-compliance or losing customer data is about, I think it's probably about $500,000 US. About 10 million rand is the maximum fine. Now, for a large organization, we had a very big pharmaceutical retailer that has breached, and they lost 400,000 customer records, and they paid the fine. It was a 10 million rand fine, and that, honestly, there's a company with 2,000 stores. It's their toilet paper fee for a couple of weeks. You know, that's not money for them. That's an absolute joke. However, what has happened and what is going to start happening around the world is that there's going to start being lawsuits being published where individuals can start suing for loss of data. So like they have in America, they have these class action lawsuits. In South Africa, we had our first class action lawsuit this year, and the company was sued by individuals on behalf of the regulator for loss of data. So we're starting to see the punishment becoming very, very severe and very, very onerous. And I'm personally quite pleased about it, because I think to some degree, personal data is not being taken seriously enough. It's also started to get particularly ugly. I don't know if you guys are following in the news. This is my game and this is what I do. So I'm on a lot of feeds and a lot of information, and I see probably one of the most dangerous things that I've seen recently is that a nursery school or a schooling system in the UK got breached, and the attackers are demanding ransomware payments, and they're not getting paid. So what they're doing is they're releasing children's information. Photographs, where they live, which school they go to, etc., 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 is being released, and they're doing it in batches of 10 kids until they get their ransomware getting paid. So the mandatory breach notification in Zimbabwe is this is by law, 24-hour notification of a Padres breach by the regulators, 72-hour notification to the data subjects. So as an individual, if your data has been breached, if you're at an organization and you're a bank, your data gets breached, as the organization, the onus is on you as the organization to go and actually inform people. Now, this is very interesting because in the USA, they've got exactly the same law, but in the USA, the interesting part is that the customer needs to be notified by US mail. The physical letter needs to get posted to them by the US mail. Now, the biggest breach in history is a crowd in the US called United Healthcare. They had, beginning of 2024, they had attackers in their system for 9 days. They had 180 million records stolen over 9 days. The only reason they knew that the data was stolen is on day 10, they started encrypting their systems. And I'll talk about the next challenge and the next thread of where we're going with data and what we can do to protect our data. But this is the kind of challenge that we've got, where this company had, I think it was 90 million, so it was 180 million records, but it was 90 million individual customers. They had to post out 90 million letters. Can you imagine the cost incurred in 90 million pieces of paper, 90 million pieces of ink, 90 million stamps? Just the cost associated with data breaches are getting absolutely ridiculous. High risk breaches require immediate public disclosure, and you have to put in place, you have to prove to the regulator that you've put remediation in place. And this is fantastic. I think this is really important. Again, whether it's being enacted or whether it's being enforced, it will be. It will be going forward. So what is the challenge? Where are we with ransomware at the moment? And again, as I said, I live and breathe this. I've been doing this now. We did cybersecurity for 19 years. I've been in this game now for 3 years, specifically in the data protection space for 3 years, and it's starting to become really ugly. I'm old enough to remember when an attack was around getting into a system, getting into a web page and changing the pictures or changing the wording, and it was funny, and it was bragging rights. You know, I'm a hacker and I managed to break into the FBI. Now it's become a business. The cost associated right now with cyber breaches in the world is $10.5 trillion US. You cannot comprehend that amount of money in terms of trillion dollars. That's 1,000 billion, which is 1,000 million. So it's 1,000 million is the cost of data breaches right now, today. What I also know is that, and I do an analysis on this, there is one data breach, one cyber attack, one data breach happening every 19 seconds in the world. And here's the scary part, it's getting worse because there's numbers on here, and there's 94% of them are now exfiltration attacks. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. Sorry, 90% of them are exfiltration attacks. So I'll talk a little bit about ransomware, and ransomware is moved on the next slide. But exfiltration is becoming a real problem. Your data is being stolen. And I've got hundreds of stories, and they're fantastic to talk about. Some of them, like the school ones, are deeply worrying, like the United Healthcare ones. But what we're starting to see happen is the exfiltration attacks that are happening and the ransomware attacks are starting to adapt. And why they're starting to adapt is becoming particularly interesting. I mean, I'm not going to read through the statistics there. You can go through all of this. And if you want, I'll make this slide available to you. Why they're becoming particularly interesting is because we're seeing really good cyber technology being put in place. So the technical people will understand things like defense in-depth methodologies, will understand the layering of the security that we put in place. My friends from Fortinet over there do a fantastic job of building out that security stack, of putting it in place. They talk about the Forti fabric and all of those good things. I'm certainly not a Forti expert. I'll defer to my friend and colleague over there. But you put layers of security in place, and that's the whole idea. And for non-technical people, I always refer to it as like physical security. You can do it in the same way. You know, you arrive at an office block and there's a boom with the guard who checks you in, and then you arrive at a security, you know, and there's another security checkpoint, and so on and so forth. And we do that with cyber as well. So we have things like firewalls, we have our XDR and our EDR, we have all of these protections in place, we have phishing protection technology in place. And what we got down to with that, if you have a look at any of the standards around it, what we got down to is backup. And there's fantastic backup technology around today. Things like Rubrik, I'll mention some names, Commvault, that are offering a warranty, a guarantee that if you get infiltrated and your data gets encrypted, you can recover from a backup. And they guarantee it. They give you a $10 million guarantee that if you cannot recover from a ransomware attack, they will pay you $10 million US. They've had this for 5 years. They've never had a single incident they can't recover. So what has happened is attackers have adapted and evolved, and they've moved over to the next thing. And the next thing is it's no point in getting into your system and encrypting your systems, okay, if you've got a backup, because nobody's going to pay the ransom. And again, remember what I said, the ransomware and the cybersecurity cost today is $10.5 trillion. We know that it's successful business. If Maze and Mingle wasn't a successful business and weren't selling coffee and cakes, they would shut down. cybersecurity attacks are becoming a very, very good, valuable business. And I actually saw an advert put out by, I think it was Alpha or Klopp, one of the two big cyber things, offering people, and it's become the next thing as well, they're offering people in organizations money to give access to internal systems. So we mentioned there's a bank over here, bank employees, well, they'll reach a bank employee and they'll say, hey, listen, if you give us access, or if you put this USB key into your machine, or if you do something on the machine, we'll split the exfiltration amount that we can steal from the company with you. It's becoming a real business. They're putting adverts out encouraging people to do this, and they're doing, it's now called RAS. Ransomware as a service is becoming a thing. And it's deeply, deeply concerning. So the next level of attack that we're seeing, and this is the game changer, is the idea of extorting people for ransomware. And there's a couple of phases of this. Number one is they get into your system, and guys, we know that they're going to get into your system. We put all of the security in place. We spend as much money as we want. We're still going to have data breaches. The idea of defense in depth methodology or NIST or any of these frameworks that we put in place, the idea of it is put the security in place, but always assume a breach. You have to assume a breach. And I say that because the biggest IT spender in the world right now is AT&T in the US. They spend $100 million in cybersecurity. They've had 3 breaches this year. So this is not about how good your systems are. This is not how much money you spend. This is not how good your policies and processes are. You put all of those in to mitigate, but you assume a breach. And the problem is that there's 3 phases now. They're getting into a system. They're taking the data out. Now what they're doing with that data is where the problem comes in. They're stealing that data, they're holding on to that data, and this is where it becomes a compliance failure and becomes a massive problem for compliance people, is this has to be reported on. Number one is they're saying to you, pay us and we'll give you your data back, because some people don't have a backup. Okay? Number 2 is we'll steal the data, and if you don't pay us, we will then leak it on the dark web, or we'll leak your data, and that's becoming the most common one. We saw that happen at Econet here. Anybody from Econet? Nobody from Econet, so I can mention the name without getting hammered or things thrown at me. But Econet had exactly this. South Africa, I can list MTN, FNB, the big bank in South Africa, all data breaches, all the Cell C, big data breach, Deloitte & Touche, big data breach. This is all in South Africa. And what they did is they stole the data and they said, if you don't pay us, we will leak it on the dark web. And what they do is they then leak some of the data and push some of the data out. The third thing that they're doing, which is where it's getting really ugly, is that they're doing what we're calling triple threat extortion, where what they're doing is they're stealing the data, they're looking at the content of the data, and then they're extorting whoever's involved, else is involved. A great example of it. Does anybody know what Roblox is? Kiddies online game. Okay, anybody's kiddies play Roblox here? Okay, it's an online kiddies game. You have the ability to buy Robux, which is a way that you continue playing the game. What happened was Roblox have got really good security in place, but their payment partner, a company called Tipalti, I keep calling it tilapia, which is a fish. A company called Tipalti was breached. Okay, when they stole the data from Tipalti, they realized that they had Roblox data, and they then went and extorted Roblox for money, who paid them. Okay, I deal with a cyber insurance company in South Africa called I2, part of a big group called Hollard. Chat to the guy, they paid out 30 claims last year, which is a minuscule amount, but they paid out 30 claims last year in cyber breaches and data loss. So this is becoming a huge, huge problem, and the idea of getting the data out is becoming hugely problematic. So how do we solve this? And really, I want to talk a little bit about some of the principles about how we do this. We know that we can't mitigate the risk. We have a problem with it, okay? We have persistent file leaking happening. How do we protect that information? We have really good technology in place, like a DLP in place that'll protect the files within the environment, but it can be quite onerous to put in place and to start working with, which means that we have to go and identify all of our data, and our data is based on classification. So we have a set of rules. We either write them, or we use a pre-written set of rules that says first name, surname, ID numbers, banking details, credit card details, all of that information. That's all a set of data. We've now got millions of pieces of information in our organization. We now need to overlay that and start looking at that information, and then we need to flag the file. We need to say this file is sensitive, this file is internal use only, and things like that. And whilst it's an important piece of information, it doesn't stop data exfiltration, which is mass exfiltration. The other problem with it, and while it has its place and it's absolutely important and should be put in place, you're looking at probably 6 to 18 months of work to get that implemented, and you're at risk at the time that you're putting that in place. It also doesn't stop the idea of mass data exfiltration, people getting into systems. The second problem that we've got is, do we know if if data is being exfiltrated? There is a rumor going around, and it's never been proven, but it's pretty certain that Volkswagen has had somebody in their system for 5 years, leaking data out of their system for 5 years without them knowing. We have interesting ways of data being stolen as well. Very famous story in South Africa where one of the banks, an employee was disgruntled, he took a memory key, put it into the side of his machine and downloaded information. Now he had access rights to do that. So where a DLP system would be challenged, he had access rights to do that and he had the authority to do that. He wrote it onto a memory key, took the memory key out and went to the competitor with a bunch of information on a memory key. That data is now external to the organization, and a DLP system sits within the frame of your organization. What happens when the data is actually exfiltrated and how does it get out there? So this is the kind of things that we need to start looking at and start understanding. The product that I talk about, and I'm going to wrap up now, the product that I talk about called It's Mine works in a completely different way. It does not base the system in any way, shape or form on the content of the file. I don't care what the content of the file is, it's based on the location of the file. So we don't scan the file. I just did an implementation 2 weeks ago. It took me from kickoff to UAT 2 weeks, and the customer was compliant and securely compliant. We have the ability with the solution. I'm not going to go into the technicalities. If anybody's interested in protecting data, come chat to me afterwards and I'll talk about, this presentation wasn't around the technicalities of it, but the ability of the solution to secure data is unprecedented. There is no other technology that I've found in the world right now that will do what this does in a seamless way. So easy to implement, literally 15 minutes to install. The learning curve is 2 to 3 days. It has the ability to identify breaches. We know if somebody gets into the system and we know if somebody's breaching. So number one, I can identify a breach. Number two, I can protect a file and I can destroy a file that has been breached at any time, even if it is offline. Even if it is offline. That memory key that was stolen out of the machine, sitting in my pocket, I can destroy the files on that, and I'll explain it to you if you want to know. I can destroy the files on that memory key remotely. I don't care where my data resides, I don't care how my data is stored, and I don't care what the content of the data is. It can be sensitive information, it can be pictures of my family, it doesn't make a difference. I can protect that data no matter where it is. And thirdly, I have the ability to control access to that file to anybody. So if I need to share information, we spoke about data sovereignty and the importance of data sovereignty. We spoke about, I saw somebody with a Lancet sign-on. Somebody from Lancet, I saw a Lancet badge here, there we go, so Lancet. Very, very interesting use of data for me, healthcare. There's a lot of personal information that gets shared. We had a very big breach in South Africa into a group called the NHLS, National Health Laboratory Services, government-owned Lancet, okay? We had a data breach there and that was extremely sensitive personal information that was taken. But more importantly, data is often shared. Think about a healthcare environment, it's particularly interesting. I have patient records and patient information and blood test results that need to get shared with clinicians and doctors and medical insurance companies. And I'm talking to CMAS, anybody from CMAS here? So CMAS, you know, there's important medical records. How do we share that information in a controllable method? And a really interesting use case as well here is I have a letter that I need to send out to my lawyer. Okay. Now, it's a sensitive document, so I need to, if I'm using a DLP system, I need to bypass my DLP system because I have a sensitive file that I need to go send out to my lawyer. The lawyer receives the file and he makes 25 copies of it, okay, because he's version controlling. We call them shadow copies on his machine, and he's got 25 copies of your highly sensitive legal document sitting on his laptop. He then finishes it up and he goes and finishes it and he signs it off and he sends you version 25 with his bill, you know, his thousands of dollars of charges for his legal fees. Where are those 25 copies? They're sitting on his laptop. This is now getting into a completely different challenging topic, which is supply chain management. How do we protect the information that is on somebody else's laptop? Does he have antivirus? Does he have password on it? Does he have viruses on his machine? We don't know. We don't know if anybody's breached that machine. How do we control data outside, externally to our organization? And this technology has the ability to do that. If we use this technology, we can remove the file from the organization, send it in any way, shape or form. Memory key, cloud, I don't care how you send it. I can airdrop it on a phone. It doesn't really make a difference how that data is sent. I can control the access to that file at any point in time. I can go and kill that file, whether it's version controlled or not, whether it's 25 copies of the file. I can take full remote control and I can access that, I can kill that file anytime I want. Very, very interesting technology. I'm going to wrap up by saying data security is probably one of the most important aspects of cybersecurity right now. It's also one of the most onerous or challenging problems that customers are facing right now. I'm seeing so many tenders and RFPs and things like that coming out for data loss prevention, and it's all around how do we categorize our data. I'm seeing really good data management and DSPM, data posture management tools that are coming out that are identifying data. Fantastic. Simon spoke about the idea of data sovereignty within a public cloud and moving that into the private cloud environment. So important. But how do we control our files externally in the organization? So that's what I want to present on. That's the time. I know I tend to get very excitable. I am available. Come and chat to me. This is a very interesting technology. I don't want to go around technology, but data governance is going to become more and more problematic for everybody to start managing. This is the solution. And it's inexpensive, and it's easy to implement, and it's incredible. The most important part about this is it's seamless to your users. There is almost zero learning curve for your users to use this. There is no change in the way that they work. There is no being concerned about having to categorize files as they're creating them. The system does this all automatically. So thank you very much for your time. I think I'm in time. I may have overrun by 5.